Hey guys, welcome back. I've got a video that's going to be covering two subjects here. First, I'm going to run through all the settings that I'm using on this 85-inch Sony X900H to get the very best picture quality. I'm going to cover SDR, HDR10, Dolby Vision, Netflix modes, because this has separate settings for all of those and more. We're going to go through everything through the menus, and I'll explain why I'm doing some of the stuff. And then I'm going to give you a subjective review. I've been using the snot out of this. My wife's actually been using it more than me, and we absolutely love it. It's not perfect. It is not perfect, but I'm going to get into all of that after going through the settings. So first, you might notice this big old white light here, and that is the light that I'm using to light myself here. And you can probably tell already that reflections are not the greatest on this. So that light's gonna stay there. Don't mind it. I need some light on me to do this because I've got the camera exposed to get you the best looking picture. It looks exactly like it does to me. I've got it white balanced and perfectly exposed, so it's looking really good on the camera for this video. So that's what that guy is there. All right, so going through the settings. First of all, nice menu system. It's Android TV and it's quick, it's snappy. You've got one button to bring up this fast access menu here with common things like brightness or changing your picture presets. First of all, I highly recommend that you use custom mode. If you're doing any kind of calibration, you don't have a choice. It applies it to the custom preset slot as your only option. But out of the box, the custom mode is already set up for the most accurate color. Second best is the cinema mode, and the only difference is the gamma setting between those two. You can adjust the gamma setting on cinema and it's the same as custom. So you really do to get two slots by adjusting one slider that are as dead spot on as perfect color and grayscale as possible without calibration. But everything here is going to be based off the custom slot. You just go into settings, go down to display and sound, picture, and here we go. So here you can run through left and right the different preset settings. Game mode is very special, by the way. If you're doing any kind of gaming, whether it's the built-in apps or your NVIDIA Shield or plugging in a PlayStation, Xbox, whatever, you want to use game mode, and that's not for any kind of picture settings. That's for the input lag. It brings it down near 14 milliseconds, and it is day and night from all the other presets. Games are almost unusable on the other presets. I was trying to play pinball, and I was on custom. It was like, hit a button, wait a half second, bumper. Hit a button, bumper. What is going on? I forgot to switch to game mode. So bear that in mind. You'll need game mode for whatever inputs you're using or whenever you switch to through your AVR, any kind of gaming peripheral. So going down to auto picture mode, leave it off. We're going to be leaving a lot of the processing features off because, quite frankly, they're destructive. And that's true of virtually every TV out there. Light sensor, leave it off. That's an automatic brightness thing, kind of like your phone. Those don't work very well either. Maybe if you're in a commercial environment, like a lobby or something like that, where you want it always nice and visible, and this is not set up as far as watching movies or color critical work or anything like that. Sure, go ahead and use whatever features you want, but that's what light sensor is for. Nothing to do with great picture quality. Brightness. This is pretty much the only thing that you're going to be adjusting, sometimes on the fly, certainly adjusting to taste, and that's okay. There's one really cool thing about the brightness on this TV. Most TVs that all TVs that I've had and most TVs that I've played with and experienced, the brightness, by the way, it's the backlight control on some TVs. That's what it's doing. It's just altering the brightness of the backlight. It's not the brightness control, meaning a white or black level control. The terms have been confused and switched many times throughout the years of televisions, but today it's backlight control. Pretty much every other TV I've seen blows out the highlights past a certain point. Sometimes it's half, whatever it is on the scale. This scale goes to 50. Some TVs go to 100, some go to 10, whatever it is. Usually it's about the halfway point. And you crank the thing up and you start losing high-end detail. You know, a sky full of clouds will just be a white sky, for example, you know, as a overblown example. This doesn't do that. It does not matter if you bring brightness down to the lowest or the highest setting, highlights don't blow out. It is absolutely amazing. So it really is something that you can use to taste. And that's exactly what I've done here. So, first of all, the correct calibration number is very low, extremely low. I'm a photographer and videographer. For color critical work, you're looking at around 100, and that translates to 3 on the brightness scale. That is correct. That is the correct, you are viewing in a pitch black room, 100 level. And I'm telling you, nobody is going to like that. Most home theater enthusiasts are going to like something around 120 to 150. You're talking 8 to 10. And that gets you to that level. And that's where you're actually going to set it for calibration. It's still really dim, I'm telling you. I mean, everything looks fine. The color's great, but it's just dim. In a pitch black room, it'll look fine. I don't have a pitch black room. Even here at night, if I draw the blackout curtain, I still have some ambient lights around the house. It's not pitch black. I have white ceilings. The light from the TV lights up the room. That affects what you're seeing. So I actually run 20. It's still going to be surprisingly dim to most people. And by the way, I forgot to mention, this is in SDR mode. You have to start everything in SDR mode. The HDR and the Dolby Vision and the Netflix modes and all of that have a lot of their settings derived from how you set SDR on each input. So set your SDR first, and you simply do that by playing any SDR content. That can simply be the menu. You can just bring up the menu in the TV and then bring up your settings. As long as there is something SDR on the screen, the TV is going to be adjusting the SDR settings. Or if you have an Apple TV or an NVIDIA Shield or Roku or whatever, just bring up its home screen. Boom, you're looking at SDR. As long as you don't have it set to always display HDR, which you should never do, you're adjusting SDR. And it will tell you if you have HDR enabled up at the top. There's nothing showing. That confirms it's SDR. So just make a note, do SDR before everything else. So basically, set it as bright as you need to in your worst case scenario. You can always adjust it using that quick menu. For example, if you have a really bright room, I don't have any direct sunlight in here. I've got a big 3-panel door wall that looks out onto a preserve, and in the afternoon, it's bright. There's no direct sun in the room, but it's bright. It certainly cuts through it. There's no problem at 20. You may need 30. You may need 40. You may need 50, which is its max. That's okay, because like I said, it's not blowing out the highlights. So SDR brightness to your needs and taste. It's okay. And it's also not too bad until you get above 40, affecting the black levels. Anything below 30, black levels stay absolutely constant. So that is really, really cool. And by the way, the black levels, oh, so good. Get into that later. All right, so brightness is at 20. That is seriously 90% of what you need to know about the settings of this TV. Everything else is almost default. Contrast, default. Leave it at 90. Gamma, 0 is correct, 2.2. This is the difference between Cinema and Custom. -2 is what Cinema sets to. That's 2.4. It's just a little dim in the midtones and can go a little warm. Just keep it at 0 and you are spot on accurate at 2.2. Good to go. Black level, leave it at default 50. Black adjust off. This is an artificial HDR effect to SDR content. You can probably see what it does here. See how it's affecting basically the contrast between the blue and the lighter tones. At first glance, it looks cool. It looks really cool. It looks like, wow, it made it really pop. It is so artificial. And on some scenes, in some content, it crushes the blacks and the edges get just undefined. Trust me, it's not accurate. Just leave it off. Auto contrast enhancer is pretty much the same thing for the highlights. With both of those on, you can see it gives it a very convincing fake HDR look to SDR content, but it doesn't work well for all scenes. Yes, of course, you can play with that to taste, and if you happen to like it, especially for some particular show you're watching, sure, go ahead. It's just something fun to play with, but it's not accurate. Auto local dimming. Now it defaults, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe it defaulted out of the box to medium or low. I can't remember which, but you want it on high. It gives you, first of all, it's the only way to get the best black levels, the most consistent black levels, the most consistent screen wipe. Low, off are almost unusable. You're gonna have gray clouding. You're gonna have just splotches of backlight. It's terrible. This is a full array local dimming screen. There's absolutely no reason it should ever be off, in my opinion, for watching movies. Some people don't say they see a big difference between low, medium, and high. That means you don't have the rest of your settings correct, because if you just look here, it is quite obvious. Yes, the screen dims, and that's okay. Going up to high. It's where it needs to be. High is the only setting where you're going to get those beautiful black levels that you might have seen people talking about. I've seen a lot of people posting pics and videos and talking about it, saying, oh, the blacks aren't that great, or they got a lot of haloing or problems, and that's probably because they're not at the right setting. This is rather unforgiving. The settings need to be correct, and they pretty much all need to be correct to get the great results. If they're off, you're not getting great results. Extended dynamic range. Again, fake HDR for SDR, leave it off, same reasons. Color, default. Everything default. Live color, turn it off. I believe out of the box it was on medium, might have been low, but it was definitely on. You want that off. What that's doing, and it's again one of those fun effects, but it's very unpredictable. It's using artificial intelligence to analyze not only frame by frame, but parts of the scene. And for example, my wife is binge watching Golden Girls at the moment on Hulu. Very low res, 480i, looks like absolute hot garbage. And it's washed out. You know, it's old footage and it's really dull. You turn this on, first of all, low looks even worse than off. I don't know why. It gets even more faded. Medium starts to saturate parts of the scene. High saturates almost all the parts of the scene, but just shifting the color. I was testing this, I remember on a kitchen scene, the Golden Girls are in their kitchen, right? And they've got dark wood cabinets in the kitchen. And they turned orange. They had an orange tint to them. It just doesn't work right. It's one of those features where, well, maybe it's a good idea, but maybe it'll get better in a future firmware update. Right now, definitely leave it off. Clarity, all default. Sharpness is pretty much the only thing here. Reality Creation is their version of upscaling, and it's pretty useless. It's absolutely nothing remotely like the NVIDIA Shield Pro with their artificial upscaling. I've never seen anything as good as that, and that's what I use. Even turning it all the way up, putting it on manual, cranking it up, auto, barely any difference. And again, testing worst case scenario, 480i. If you can't notice much of a difference on there, there's not much point to it. It did its best upscaling Blu-ray 1080p to 4K, but again, it was not anywhere near like you get with the NVIDIA Shield. Even my last TV, the Vizio P-Series, did a far better job with the upscaling. I had no problem using that as my upscaler before I got the Shield Pro. So I do recommend you turn off Reality Creation. There's just no point. They show this example here. It does nothing of the sort. Nothing like what they show here. Leave the noise reduction off. Motion. Okay, this is one of the big bugs that are currently in the TV. This is version 1 of the software. These have only been shipping a couple weeks, and they've got bugs, and this is a huge one. It is really annoying. It's not a showstopper, but it's really annoying. This is where the soap opera effect comes into play, and some other settings. Now, they've got two different sections here, motion flow and cinemotion. And I wish the industry would standardize on labels. As far as I can tell, Cinemotion is handling Judder Control for everything above 24 FPS, but don't quote me on that. There's nothing in the manual about this. What I do find is it doesn't give the soap opera effect, but it makes things a little almost fuzzy in the way that you get movement. It's kind of like a half effect. It's just wrong. It just isn't working, whatever it's supposed to be doing. I suggest you leave it off. Motion flow, definitely leave it off, okay? But here's the bug. It kicks itself back on. It will randomly switch back to auto. Now, the good part is, it's really good. This is by far the best motion smoothing I have ever seen. It is not the typical soap opera effect, which is just sickeningly smooth and looks like you upscaled everything to 60 or 120 FPS and it's just, you know, fluid no matter what you're playing. No, it is really natural. In fact, the first time it happened, and I had it off, I knew I had it off, and I'm watching something, and I'm going, was this filmed at 48 FPS or something? What? There's something different. It was just something on Netflix I was testing. And that's when I realized this had been tripping back on. And sure enough, it happens over and over. I cannot put my finger on exactly what's tripping it. And that's what's most frustrating to me because I like solving problems. It seems to be random. I'm sure it's not random, but whatever is tripping it, I have not found it yet. But I'll just be watching something. Sometimes it's a totally different device. Sometimes it's a totally different format. Sometimes it's 24 FPS content. Sometimes it's 30. It just, boom, it's back on. And you notice it. Here's what it does for you, all right? Like I said, it's the best motion control I've ever seen in a TV, but it has one very big effect on your head, and it suspends disbelief. It really does make it look like live in-person acting, and it just takes you out of the show. It does a really good job of it. If you want to play with it, if you like it, stick it on auto and be amazed. But I recommend you turn it off, leave the show exactly as it is. Now here's another really cool thing. Going back to Judder, the TV automatically applies Judder Control to 24 FPS formats. Anything coming in, automatically handled. there's no setting for it. You don't have to do anything for it. And that is the most critical thing of any motion smoothing or processing of a TV. Handles it flawlessly. So when I'm streaming any of my movies through Plex, no matter what this is set to, even off, it's handled, no judder, we're good. So you don't have to worry about that. By the way, clearness is a black frame insertion. I'll show you the effect here. That is a way to affect motion control by inserting flashing black frames, basically turning the backlights on and off very quickly. The effect can be good or bad. It's usually pretty good for the motion part, but bad for everything else. Now on my previous TV, the Vizio, it dropped brightness by 50% because there was only an on or off, and it was literally flashing the LEDs at half rate. So you're getting half the brightness because it was interjecting those black frames. This has more than on or off, but you can see as you turn it up, the screen does dim. Now, one isn't too bad. This is where the Vizio was, and Max is absolutely unusable. So that's simply because it's flickering the backlight and you're losing your light. Leave it off, trust me. Video signal is just all on auto, and this is just taking care of the processing of the signal coming in as far as switching from HDR to SDR and back. And the advanced color adjustment is your calibration stuff. Absolutely leave it alone. If you do not have calibration equipment, you cannot plug in calibration numbers of any other set. And I don't mean any other model, I mean any other physical TV. I could have two of these right here next to each other, and they're gonna have different numbers. You can feel free to plug in any numbers you like. You can play around with every bit of that till your heart's content. It may end up being better. I doubt it will because these things are so good out of the box, but it may be worse. That's the point. I know ratings.com just came out with their full review of this, and they posted some of their calibration results. They went through and they actually calibrated the set they had, and they just, for informational purposes, put their calibration numbers in. You can feel free to plug those in, but don't expect yours to be correct. It may be closer, it may not be, but it won't be correct because their numbers are only for that one particular panel off the assembly line. That's the point of calibration. So that's what that is. All right, that is it for all the settings for SDR. From here, it gets even easier because we're only changing one or two things for HDR, Dolby Vision, and the Netflix modes, and whatever else you're using. So to get the settings for the other modes, you have to play content in those other modes. We're going to do Netflix here first, and this one happens to be in Dolby Vision. So we'll go into our settings again, display, picture, and we can see that it is in HDR, and if it is a Dolby Vision signal coming through, we'll see our selection here for picture mode says either Dolby Vision Dark or Bright. And that is simply, are you in a very bright room? You're probably gonna like the bright setting. Are you in a normal or a darkened room? Definitely use the darker setting. The darker is correct, and it's like we set the SDR as far as the brightness, and bright simply cranks everything up. That's if you have sunlight streaming through your house and you need the extra brightness. It's definitely way brighter than correct, but it looks really good in the daytime. I'm not that bright in here, so I use the dark. And then we can go through and see that everything else is going to be pretty much the same. Brightness on all the HDR signals you want maxed out. This automatically controls where the brightness is going to be. Unlike SDR, this needs all the backlight it can get. So a lot of these settings are going to be cranked up, but it's automatically controlling them, and you don't want to adjust them. Brightness, contrast, maxed out. Gamma, leave it again at 0. Black level, same. This is the key difference. Extended dynamic range needs to be on high. It defaults to high, leave it there. SDR off, HDR high. This is what gives you that extreme contrast between the highs and the lows that makes HDR do its thing. Leave it default. Color. Turn that off. I believe it defaulted on all modes. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember out of the box. I've been tweaking this thing and testing for endless hours. You want it off on all your different settings. Clarity, same things. Reality creation, make sure it's off. Motion, same things. These are going to be the same no matter what. All right, so same thing for HDR, same thing for Dolby Vision. That's all you need to do. Okay, so now my thoughts about it. First of all, I'm going to get through the negatives first. It's not perfect. It is far from perfect. If you're expecting black levels like an OLED, forget about it. Not that good. It's good. It's really good for a regular TV, for an LED backlit TV. It is inky black. It is controlled. I have no problems with the blooming, no problems with halos. It's certainly better than the vast majority of TVs out there, but it's not OLED at all. So if that's what you're thinking this is, forget about it. If you need OLED, buy an OLED. Now, I talked about earlier some firmware bugs. That motion control flipping back on its own, even though it's set to off, was one. That's a repetitive one. I've had two more pop up that, again, I cannot reproduce on demand, and they've each only happened one time, but they were disconcerting. And I have no doubt that hopefully all three of these and whatever else is out there that I haven't experienced yet are going to be handled very soon by the upcoming firmware update that they are pushing out. They said it's going to be in correlation with the new PlayStation 5 coming out that's adding HDMI 2.1, eARC, variable refresh rate, and other stuff, including hopefully some bug fixes. Now, the first one that I ran into was the Wi-Fi turning off. And I don't mean just turning off, I mean it wouldn't turn on. You would go into the menu. First of all, it stopped responding to anything network related. And I go into the menu and the Wi-Fi was toggled off. You toggle it back on, it connects and then flips back off like a breaker, right? Had to unplug it from the back, from the wall, to reset it. Turning it on and off again using the reset in the software menu did nothing. So luckily, like I said, it was only the one time. The other thing that happened was a little more serious. The whole TV locked up, froze. Picture was still on. The menu was responsive for the first menu push. I hit the settings. The TV stopped responding to my Harmony. I got the Sony remote, hit the settings button, menu came up, and then the whole thing just froze. Didn't blank, just wouldn't do anything. Again, had to unplug it to do a reset, and it's only happened once, but it's got bugs. So those are really the only negatives about this TV. Everything else has what I'll call compromises. Number one, biggest compromise, and it is a design feature of this TV. It has so-so off-axis viewing. Now, the way I've got my room set up here, my main seating position is 8 feet from the screen, and I have a two-person home theater, love seat, couch, dual seat kind of thing, and then two more individual home theater seats to the sides of that. Perfect viewing angle for the main two seats, and that's really all I care about. The other two are for when we have guests over, and usually we sit in those and we let the guests sit in the front. So by sitting off to the side, and it's about a 20-degree angle, the colors start to get a little less saturated. They don't shift all that much. It gets a little bit dimmer. Everything just kind of turns down, right? The Vizio is actually more noticeable. I'm happy enough with this where I'm perfectly content watching a film in my side seats. It's not bad at all. After because I know what it looks like in the main seats. If I'm watching something that I've seen before, I can tell, but I very quickly forget that it's different. So it's that level of okay. But again, not OLED. OLED does not shift at all. So if that's what you need, if you have a really wide room, or if you have, you know, a pool hall or something that you're needing really off-axis viewing, like if you have a bunch of people over watching sports, you need OLED. Plain and simple, because anymore, and it doesn't get okay. It gets really washed out and the colors start to go funky. The Vizio that I replaced, the P series, was about the same as far as dipping down in the brightness, but it shifted colors rather quickly. And I'm not seeing that here. So it's a slight improvement there as far as the off-axis. But why I say that's a specific feature of this set, Sony has something that they have, I can't remember what it's called, brain fart, excuse me. But it's a filter that gives you better off-axis viewing. And they put that in the 950 model. So if you need the off-axis viewing, look for the 950 model. If you don't, what this gives you in exchange for not having that filter is much better contrast, more straight ahead. So better picture quality in the main seats, better picture quality in the wings for the 950. So pick your poison there. That's really the biggest compromise of the set. Now, another thing that I've seen reported and tested, and it's kind of weird, but it's also something that you really don't need to be concerned about. When people are testing the brightness of this, they're doing so with samples that are called window sizes. And they're literally like little squares of light, for example, that they bring up on the screen and they measure the brightness of that window. And a 10% window is a very standard test. And it's meant to test if you have an HDR movie you're watching, for example, and there's a small, like a sun, for example, in a small section of the screen, how bright is that going to be? Because that is going to be your best brightness. A small section of the screen pumped up to max, that's going to be the best number that the TV can produce. And as it expands out, the overall brightness will come down, but that's supposed to be the best. And it's not. For some reason, when you're testing the small window size in this, it's dim. It's noticeably like 20% down from just a 30% window. For whatever reason, this TV is detecting those test signals and dimming the 10% windows. So the test results coming back on ratings and other test sites are terrible. But you don't need to worry about it, because I'm here to tell you, in real movies, in real use, not in a test square, in real scenes, it is as bright as you will ever want it to be. I will remember this forever because it's the first time this has ever happened to me. I've seen lots of reviewers. They'll talk about a particular scene, Spare Change, for example. Great channel that does a lot of 4K movie reviews as far as the technical aspects. He rates how good the bass was and how good the color was and that kind of thing. Not a review of the movie, but the technical aspects. And it's very frequent where he'll say something like, oh, blinding bright HDR. That phrase, blinding. I kind of thought, well, maybe it's just a metaphor. No, it is not. I was testing out a scene. It was the Rise of Skywalker. I know, some of you hate the movie. I actually like it. It was a scene where Rey is in Kylo's quarters and they're doing their mind link thing, right? And the first time they lock sabers in their Force Dream or whatever it is. Holy crap, I involuntarily squinted and winced from the brightness of those lightsabers just coming up on screen real quick. It was brighter than the Vizio ever got. I mean, not even close. And I think it's a combination of two things. Maybe one more important than the other, One, the actual brightness. This is a little bit brighter. Two, the size. There's more of the brightness. And most reviewers I see that are using that phrase, they're on a huge screen. They're using projectors. So they have a lot of brightness to go around. Well, this was the first time that ever happened to me. So even though you're gonna see a lot of online reporting of it's not that bright, it's bright. It is brighter than you'll probably want it. So don't worry about that. If you're in a dark room, you may be tempted to turn the brightness down. It's that bright. And like I said earlier, the highlights don't blow out. That is what amazes me. Even though those sabers were just cooking, you saw all the details and the color in the beams and everything around them. Nothing blew out. Absolutely amazing. So don't worry about the brightness. It is awesome. Black levels, something else that I see touted as being great, but online, especially in like the owner's forum, people are having some problems, man. It's the settings. All those settings need to be where I showed you to get those inky controlled blacks. Almost OLED. Not OLED, but almost. If you have those settings off, if you're using those special features like the extended mode, or if your contrast is off default, anything like that, your black levels will immediately suffer. And there are some of those in there that absolutely kill black levels. They turn them gray, the uniformity goes to crap. Trust me, use those settings and you will have excellent highlights, excellent brightness, excellent black levels. The HDR is out of this world. The color is as accurate as any set I've seen out of the box. It's fantastic. I'm really amazed that they threw all of this in the mid-tier TV, but I'm really happy they did. So like I said in my unboxing and setup video, I will have hopefully a full calibration of it, if it makes any difference whatsoever, if Calman ever updates their software. Long story short, they ghosted me on communications. I asked them about it and we figured out that the 2020 software for AutoCal for Sony does not support any of their 2020 TVs. I said, okay, is there an update coming out? That would be the ideal solution. I want the software. I have the software. I want it to work. No reply. Okay, fine. A couple days go by. I ask for a refund. No reply. Okay, a couple days go by. I escalate it to a PayPal resolution. It's been 3 days. They didn't reply to that at all. Okay, fine. Escalated it to a claim. So now I'll just have to force my money back. So I'll be getting that back by the end of the month. Really disappointed in Calman's customer service there. Number one, they shouldn't have a 2020 version of the software out if it doesn't support the 2020 TVs. That's ridiculous. But ghosting somebody, that's no bueno. So, hope this helps somebody. Put in those settings, let me know what you think, and enjoy your TV if you've got one. If you're looking at this thinking, should you get one? Highly recommend it, absolutely. And just make sure that you purchase through a reputable vendor with a great price match and return policy. Oh, I forgot to mention one thing. There have been a number of people that I've seen online, specifically about the smaller sizes. I haven't seen reports about the 85, having some panel issues, some banding, some DSE, some uniformity. Not a lot of people, but definitely more than one person having very repeatable problems. This one doesn't have any problems. That's the best I can say. I don't know if it's specific to panel sizes. I don't know if it's pure luck of the draw. I don't know too many people that have gotten the 85 yet. Most people seem to be getting the 65, which looks like a really good deal. And I haven't seen too many get the 75, but the 65s apparently have the most problems. That's what I'm going by, at least right now, on the initial release. But to answer a lot of people that have been asking me, I haven't had any problems, and I don't see any problem with this physical panel. So that's the best I can say about that. I highly recommend it. I'm loving it. It's not going to be my last TV. It's not a perfect TV, but it's more than good enough for right now. I love the size. That was critical for me. It verified what size I want to be in this room, And whatever my next one will be this size or larger. So very happy. It's a good deal. Like I was saying about a retailer, make sure they have a great return policy. Don't buy through B&H, for example. They charge a return fee. Ridiculous in this day and age, 2020. I got this through Crutchfield. They have a 60-day price match guarantee against Amazon, as long as it's sold by Amazon, B&H, and can't remember what their other one was. Might be, Best Buy. So you're pretty much covered there. Those are the big three as far as TV purchases. So I'm not worried. If it goes on sale any one of those three places, I get an instant refund. That's it. See you guys next time.